Yo guys, it's Bromos and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we'll be covering what confirmation is and how we can buy in at it. I cannot stress enough how important it is to learn how to trade at confirmation, and it's been something that many people have been asking me for a while, so I thought, why not just make a video on it? Before we start today's video, I just want to remind you guys to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you guys enjoy my teaching content for trading stocks. Anyways, let's get started. So what is confirmation exactly? Confirmation is when you have multiple indicators that suggest that a stock will continue to move in a certain direction. Just using one indicator is not enough in my opinion for determining where a stock will head, and I feel it's just as important to back up your reasoning with multiple indicators. More than likely, you will know where the stock will head if you do this. It's no different from when Sherlock Holmes is trying to catch criminals. He doesn't announce to the enemy that they're guilty until he has more than enough proof to prove that they commit the crime. Trading stocks is no different. You just need to have multiple proof that suggests that the stock will head in the right direction. There are times where you might not have enough indicators, but you're still able to accurately predict the correct trend of the stock. And that's fine. I'm only suggesting that adding more confirmation will increase your probability of success, in my personal opinion. Some commonly used indicators that people like to use are chart patterns, candlestick patterns, the simple moving averages, price versus volume action, multiple time frames, and support and resistance. If you haven't learned these concepts yet, then I highly recommend doing so before watching this video because these are the fundamentals that make up trading. I will be making future videos on these bullish indicators and how to use them the right way. But for now, let's go over some examples on how to trade with confirmation with them. So here we have a stock that's been going down for around 2 months before moving up a bit. The latest candlestick shows that it made a big move, but would we consider that confirmation? No, this would not be confirmation because only one move has happened, and that's not enough to truly know if the bulls will take back control of the stock. Also, take a note that it's still inside the downward falling wedge chart pattern. Let's see what happens for the next day for the stock. The stock makes a huge move upward, approaching the 200 SMA, but ultimately faces rejection and starts to pull back to the 50 SMA and closing above it. Now let me ask you this. Would you guys consider this confirmation? Well, it definitely looks a lot better than what we saw before, but now we have to take into consideration that it couldn't even break above the 200 SMA line. I mean, yeah, it closed above the 50 SMA line, but we want to make sure that it's actually going to go up. So that is why this is not confirmation. Well, in my eyes at least, it's not confirmation, and we need more proof that the stock will continue to go up. If the stock is meant to go up, then what's the harm in just waiting like an extra day or two? Now let's see what the next candlestick looks like in this chart. It managed to gap up from yesterday's close, but then a lot of sellers started jumping in, expecting that the stock would face more rejection due to yesterday's wick. The stock goes below the 50 SMA line, but bounces up the falling channel and managed to close right back above the 50 SMA with a doji candlestick. At this point, this would have been more than enough confirmation for me to buy at the point of close. Some of you guys might have attempted to buy when it touched the previous resistance of the falling channel, but that would have been a bit more risky because it went below the 50 SMA line at that point in time. There are times where I do break that rule due to me predicting that it will go back above, like my 50 SMA line, but in this case, I would have just waited for the next close above the 50 SMA line. If you guys wanted even more confirmation, then what you guys could have done is just wait another day and buy in a few cents above its high up day. In any case, I would have had my mental stop loss below the 50 SMA line at this point with the 200 SMA line as my price target. If you feel the 50 SMA line is not a suitable stop loss target and you want to give it some more wiggle room, then you can just use the previous resistance of the falling channel, which is now acting as support here. Now I will reveal the end result of this stock. Bam! The stock continued to move higher and we managed to reach our price target, the 200 SMA line. Even if you waited an extra day, you would have still made a very nice profit here if you stuck to the plan regarding confirmation. Now let's take a look at another example for buying in a confirmation. Here we have a stock that's moving sideways for about a month before gapping down and continued to move down until it started to reverse and steadily climb back up. So what's going on here? Could the stock be possibly going back up or down? Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that on a smaller scale, it broke out of the falling wedge and manages to go to the 50 SMA line. Unfortunately, it faced rejection there and pulled back down a bit. We can also see in terms of big picture, the stock is still at an overall upward trend as indicated by the rising channel. Would you guys say we have a confirmation here? Again, while we did see a nice move, it still faced rejection at the 50 SMA line, meaning that there are sellers over there and they're like, no, we don't want you to keep going higher, stay down. We would need more information in order to determine whether or not that's actually a really strong resistance area, or it's just weak and then the stock is just waiting to make that big move. So let's see what happens the next day. It makes a small red candlestick that bounces off support here. Would you guys call this confirmation? For me, I would have added some here because it made a small bottom tail with the 20 SMA line despite the gap down. It's not the strongest confirmation. However, it's one I would be okay with. Now, let's continue to move forward. Next day, it closes with another bullish candlestick. Again, you can argue that this was confirmation because it managed to close above the 20 SMA line with a stronger candlestick. Let's say you added in yesterday with me. Maybe you could have added in some, and then when you saw today's candlestick, you could have been like, okay, this is stronger confirmation. I'm just going to add some more shares here. Maybe it could be your full size. Maybe it could be your 1/4, 1/2. It doesn't matter as long as you have a plan. Let's look at the next day to see what happens. Not much really happened, but it's still holding the trend area. Again, this could be another buyable area, but ultimately it's not the confirmation that we're really looking for yet. Now look at this. For the first time, it managed to close above the 50 SMA line with a huge bullish candlestick. Can we now say that this is confirmation? Yeah, this would definitely be confirmation in my eyes because not only did it close above the 50 SMA line, but it managed to engulf some other candlesticks along the way, suggesting that buyers are stepping in and that shorts are starting to freak out. The stock breaks out the chart pattern, but ultimately comes back to its resistance area. This is where you could have sold if you really wanted to. In this type of scenario, it would be best to have your stop loss at below the resistance area of the chart pattern, which is now acting as support over here. If you already entered when it broke above the 50 SMA line, while having the 200 SMA line as your price target. Now then, let's see what the end result of this is. Bam! It actually gaps above the 200 SMA line. At that point, I would have already sold from the open of the candlestick that gapped above the 200 SMA line. Notice how that even if we didn't even buy in before the break of the 50 SMA line, we could have still made a nice profit from this, and that is because we had confirmation on our side. Let's look at another example. Here we have a stock that's been moving up for quite some time before gapping up like a madman and then slowly starting to move sideways. What can we first say about the setup right here? Well, it's at a nice upward trend and holding a 200 SMA line. However, there is clearly no confirmation at this point, so let's just wait and see if one actually presents itself later on. So here the stock moves lower, but manages to bounce off the 50 SMA line and the support area of the rising channel. Would you guys say that that's confirmation? It could have been a dip buy here, but this isn't full confirmation yet because it was moving sideways before it made that dip, and we need a clear sign that this might actually reverse. So let's just wait and see what happens. It broke below the rising channel, but manages to close above the 200 SMA line with a doji bounce off the orange channel. Now we're getting somewhere. The matter of the fact is, it went below the rising channel, so confirmation for me at this point would be going back above it. Some of you guys might have tried to add here because the doji bounced off the 200 SMA line, and I would say, yeah, there's no problem with that, to be honest. That's a pretty strong move. But remember what I mentioned earlier. If a stock is meant to move upwards, then there's no harm in waiting an extra day or two. Also, I want to point out, just because it went below the rising channel, that does not automatically mean that the stock is going to go downwards. Like how there's confirmation for the bulls, there's also confirmation for the bears. And confirmation for the bears would be going below the 200 SMA line, which it has not done yet. So we are still good for now. Anyways, let's see what happens the next day. It makes a strong bullish move that manages to close back above the rising channel. Notice how the candlestick pattern is bullish engulfing. Can we now say this is confirmation? Yes, 100%. No doubt about it in my mind, this was confirmation because now we have multiple indicators that suggest this will go back up. First, we saw multiple bounces to the 200 SMA line, with one of them being a doji candlestick followed by the bullish engulfing close back above the rising channel. My mental stop loss here would be below the 200 SMA line, with my price target being around the orange line. Now let's see what happens here with our confirmation tactics. Bam! In 2 days, the stock manages to hit our price target. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it was able to hold it, but that doesn't matter to us because we have already made our plan to sell the orange line. See how confirmation can be a powerful asset when used correctly? Now then, let's do another example. Here we have a stock that had a crazy move, but ultimately went back down and continued to move lower while still holding our 50 SMA line. First thing that comes to mind is that the short term is in a downward trend with the falling wedge, while long term is at an upward trend with the rising channel. Notice how we are slowly approaching support area where this would be considered the third bounce. Let's see if we can find confirmation here. It closes with a nasty bearish candlestick that bounces off support. Is this confirmation? No, it's only a signal, but we need more proof that it will possibly reverse. It closes with another bearish candlestick below the 50 SMA line. Despite that, it's still holding the rising channel. But again, that is not confirmation, so let's keep looking. It closes with a bullish engulfing candlestick pattern on the 50 SMA line. To me, right there is a confirmation signal to buy, because not only did it manage to hold above the rising channel, but it also closed with a candlestick pattern above the 50 SMA line, which is a strong sign in my books. It closes back below the 50 SMA line, so not really much to say here. Even though we were given confirmation in the last slide, it still didn't go higher, which is okay. That just means we need to keep waiting until the stock moves up or breaks below our stop losses. So for now, we're going to look for more confirmation to prove that this stock is actually going to go up. Keep note that it's still holding the trend. So let's see what happens the next day. Will we continue to hold that trend or will it tank? It tries breaking out here, but goes back near the 50 SMA and closes there with a doji. One can argue that it might be a good place to add, but keep in mind that it faced rejection with closing at the resistance, so in my opinion, it would be wise to wait a bit. Of course, since it is above the 50 SMA line, you could possibly add some here and then add more once we get more confirmation. Now it gaps above the falling wedge, but goes back down below the falling wedge and 50 SMA line, all the way back to support. So at this point, we are on thin ice now. However, we are still holding the trend here, so we are in good shape for now. If it breaks below the chart pattern with a bearish confirmation, then we would stop out. Now let's see what happens next. Now we have a huge bullish candlestick pattern, bottom tail, that closes above the 50 SMA line and above the rising channel. That right there is the next sign of confirmation, in my opinion, so you could either add now or the next trading day when it moves a few cents higher. For me, I would add here because in the last few slides, no matter how many rejections we were dealt with, the stock always managed to hold the trend. When we broke above resistance, it became new support. And given that the stock held support well in the past, the same thing should happen again theoretically. So the plan is, if it goes below the green line, then we stop out while trying to aim for the 200 SMA line as our price target. Now let's see what happens. Wow, the stock already moved in just a day and we are out at the 200 SMA line. This play was a bit different because even though we saw confirmation early on the stock, it didn't move higher until we saw another confirmation. What this suggests is that sometimes you need to wait it out before the stock moves. A lot of time, including myself in the past, people get stopped out without realizing what is going on in the chart and not realizing there is no confirmation for the stock to continue to go down. Now, this last example I'm going to show you is really special because it was a play that I took on June 15th and sold around July 2nd for a 30% gain. It was the biggest money gainer I've ever gained because I went heavy on the stock normally than I would have, and just because the technicals on this were beautiful, and it was something that I usually don't see in many plays. This stock was called VUZI. Now let's look at on how I use confirmation for this play. So here, VUZI recently had the golden cross, aka the 5200 SMA crossover, with a strong bullish candlestick. What can we summarize about the setup here? Well, for one, we can see the bullish engulfing close alongside the golden cross. Not only that, but it was also a breakout from the falling wedge. And lastly, it was also a bounce off the long-term upward rising channel. This was confirmation in my eyes to add just because it broke out of one of the patterns while bouncing off another with a candlestick pattern. However, there is one more thing I forgot to mention to you guys, and that is the weekly chart. So let's take a look at what's going on there. So for the weekly chart for VUZI, it wasn't a long-term downtrend, but managed to break out of it and then pull back to its previous resistance, which is now acting as support here. If there is one thing I love, it's having a bull flag pullback to another chart pattern. The fact that the weekly and the daily look bullish to me tells me that more than likely this stock is going to run, which is why I was confident in this play and I was willing to wait it out no matter how long it took. Now let's walk through on my thought process for a stock and what I did to possibly add more buys. Here we can see that the stock gapped up but went back down, still holding above the previous resistance. Could have been a good entry for someone who didn't add on the bullish engulfing. Fast forwarding 2 days later, the stock continues to go down, and that is when I decided to add here. Why, you might ask? Well, it was going down on weak volume and it was still holding an area of support, so I was confident in adding more here. Now let's see what happens next over the next few days. The stock continues to move higher, but eventually pulls back to the 50 SMA line. I should have added more here because it was still holding my chart patterns, and it made a bottom tail on the 50 SMA area, suggesting that buyers were still very interested in the stock. In any case, I was thinking it was only a matter of time before this made the move. After a few days, it makes the big move that I was waiting for. I managed to sell at the top with my limit order set in and was able to walk away with a nice profit. Let's see how the weekly turned out here. As expected, the weekly broke out nicely here. Now just because I sold, that doesn't mean I'm done with this stock because I will be waiting for the pullback to come back here. I think it's pretty clear on why having confirmation is very important based on this play. With confirmation, you can increase your chances of making money on a stock. That's it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it because confirmation is truly one of the most valuable things you can learn as a trader. As a reminder, if you guys haven't already hit the like button and subscribe to my channel, then please do so only if you find value in my content. I will try to get the next stock video out soon. If you guys have any suggestions on what you guys like to see in the next videos or any comments about this video, then feel free to leave a comment below. Anyways, have a great day, friends. See ya.